Captives. They've been around for decades, but lately they're having a moment. As health insurance costs climb and volatility grows, more employers are rethinking how they finance risk. Enter health insurance captives. Structures that give employers the benefits of self-funding, greater control, transparency, and potential savings, while pooling together to share the risk of large catastrophic claims with other employers. It's a strategy gaining real traction. But is it the smart, future-focused play everyone's talking about? Or is it a complex tool that only benefits a few? The debate begins now. Welcome to today's roundtable, the TPG Difference. We are taking a close look today at health insurance captives. We'll talk a little bit why we think that needs to be rebranded. But this is a growing alternative for self-funded employers, really for mid-size employer health plans. Some say captives are a game changer. Others warn they're too complex and risky. We've got our panel here today to debate and discuss the pros and cons of captives, McLaughlin Group style. Sharp opinions, strong disagreement, but always respectful case. Let's dive into our first issue, but first let me introduce our panel. So I'm Sarah Friend, president of the Partners Group, and with me is Jane Perlis, Zach Fritz, Case Escher, and Chad Kennis. So same panel as our last debate. If you missed it, it was on ICRAs. I strongly encourage you to take a look. All right, issue one. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Risk protection. Captives promise to smooth out the bumps in healthcare costs, specifically large claims, by pooling risk across multiple employers. Proponents say this gives mid-sized employers stability they could never achieve on their own. But critics argue that risk is still risk. One catastrophic claim can hit everyone. And a well-run self-funded plan with stop-loss insurance may offer similar protection without all the extra layers and costs. So, panel, Jane, let's start with you. Do captives actually protect employers from volatility, or is this just a marketing pitch?
No, I absolutely believe that captives can provide employers with way more stability in the stop-loss market than they might achieve on their own, particularly for clients who are not super large, but kind of in that, over 100 enrolled, and a bit higher. Because the reality is, at that level, it's difficult to get if you have a stop loss level of 100 or 150,000, you're not going to have enough stop loss premium to cover those one claim. Mm-hmm. And so when you go into the captive pool, that all the employers pooling together to smooth out those large claims that happen and pool the premium is a great strategy.
Chad, what do you think? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I agree with Jane. I think there's a common misconception with a lot of employers who look at captives and say, well, I don't want to be subsidizing someone else's risk, right? I want to do this on my own. And I think we can argue that individual may not have the right personality fit for a captive, but my argument to them was also, in that year where you have a large claimant hit your plan, you're going to wish that you had other employers with a similar mentality helping the entire pool come together and share in that risk. And as claims just keep increasing year over year, and the healthcare trends and frequency of catastrophic type claims keep happening, it's going to be imperative that more employers band together to help subsidize this risk than go it alone.
Case, our resident individualist. What do you think?
Well, unlike our last conversation about ICRAs, where there's clearly an overwhelming
right answer.
Right answer, exactly. Captives is a little more nuanced. I think it works for some and not others. There are a couple of things about captives, and we've sort of said it. You said it, Jane. Employer size matters, right? And captives work for employers within a certain segment. Once an employer gets large, and what's that threshold? Who knows, maybe 800, 1,000 lives, you start getting too big for a captive. And the reason being is because the captive becomes about you then, right? You start skewing everything in the captive. So most captive managers do not want large employers in there sort of like overwhelming and skewing the pool. Number one. Number two, the name. So we've talked about this, right? I didn't grow up in the insurance industry, right? I grew up in financial planning analysis, and I've been in the insurance industry for 15 years here, a little bit longer at United. And the terms our industry comes up with are baffling. They are truly baffling. Captive is one of them. When we go to an employer, I mean, who wants to be captive? Who wants to join a captive? Who wants to basically, and here's the other thing. Captives refer to these things as cells. Right, so you've got different cells within a captive, right? You've got the by industry, you have these different cells within a captive. It's just strange, and so you have to explain all this, right? Because nobody intuitively knows what a captive is. I mean, they know what it is, but not really.
Just call it something else then.
Well, I have an idea.
Okay.
Oh, do you?
Okay,
Debuted here.
I think we should call it an exclusive, right? Because here's why. Anytime you're considering a captive as an employer, you're entering into an exclusive pool with other presumably like employers, right? And it's exclusive in that you all are after the same objective, right? You all have to think philosophically about why you're entering the captive and why you want to lock arms with other employers in order to smooth out the ups and the downs. The other thing about it is not everybody can join a captive, right? It is exclusive. Okay, just because you want into a captive doesn't mean you're going to get in, because captives decide what kind of risk they want to take. So I think exclusives is the better term.
Well, even with bad branding, captives are taking off on the West Coast. It feels like captives have been pretty popular on the East Coast and have been kind of marching west, and they're here. It feels like our consultants are quoting captives more than we ever have in the past. So, Zach, why do you think that employers are now interested in captives when they've been willing to go it alone in the past?
Well, I think as healthcare costs continue to rise, employers are feeling pretty stuck. And I think the nature of large claims getting even bigger and bigger and consuming a bigger part of spend and causing a pretty hard stop loss market. Where do you go? What do you do? And so captives can make a lot of sense from that perspective. I do think it's interesting. I think about, exclusive, and I think about then who's not exclusive and what happens to them. And I think, one of the things that I will be curious to watch as captives grow is who's getting left out and what does that mean for them? Because if captives or exclusives are picking off good risk, is that going to create a harder and harder stop loss market for everyone else? And then you just have to wait your turn to have a good year, and then maybe you can enter. And we already know stop loss, turnover with large claims. What is it? 60% of large claims are new every year. So it's just, I think it's a great lever for employers to be considering. But there's a DNA for the right employer, and I do feel that there's a concern for the non-exclusive, those that get left out, and what's going to happen to that market as well.
They go ICRA.
Well, I know. I was like, I think these two have a solution.
And then what happens to the individual market? And then are we going to swing all the way back someday?
Individual market gets better because
Sure.
Yeah.
Tune in to the last episode.
Exactly.
Case, you mentioned in your description of an exclusive, which is a great, actually, description. There is a soft benefit of captives that I don't think we really appreciate until an employer is in one and experiencing that. And that is the feeling of being a part of a community, not being alone, facing, this stop loss, the large claim, catastrophic claim market is scary to be in right now alone because of the frequency and severity of these claims. So, Jane, I know you've got some clients and captives. What do you see when they go to that annual meeting and they're surrounded by their peers who they feel like they are in this together? Tell me a little bit about that soft benefit of just being in that pool, above and beyond the risk sharing.
Yeah, it's very unique to captives, and I think it is one of the selling points is that you have quarterly calls, and then you also have this annual meeting where you all come together. And I've left those annual meetings feeling inspired, also having a lot of just ideas bubbling around in my head after hearing from actual employers inside the captive and strategies that they've put in place to help with controlling costs And so it's really great opportunity to talk to your clients about, what we heard, what could we consider implementing for our own plan the next year. And that's just something you don't necessarily get when you're self-funded by yourself. And so that is, I think, a great feature, particularly of the TPG exclusive captive that we have, that I'm not sure all other captives have. So I think we're very lucky in that regard.
Well, I also think on that point, Jane, there's something about the TPG culture, brand, mentality that our firm has built through C2 Solutions, through ourselves, right? The people that we want to generally do business with look and feel like us. They want to be with an independent firm. They want to be with a best-in-class captive manager. They want to work with other like-minded employers that share in those philosophical sameness, right? And so I think that's also part of the value that we bring to the table when we're talking about this as compared to some of the other options in the market.
I mean, being part of a community, we all kind of, humans sort of desire that, right? And so when you can bring that to the health plan, which is extremely hard to do, that is obviously an attractive feature for the right group. Obviously, some don't want to be part of a community, right? So
Even individualists like me value community.
yeah, wow, just even case.
Yeah.
Heard it here.
Sometimes.
Sometimes.
Yeah. Exactly.
For a short amount of time.
Yeah. Full disclosure, though, TPG, we are self-funded. We are in a captive.
Yes.
Right. And our renewal.
And we moved to a captive after being self-funded on our own. And so that's not a typical path. I think it's important to remember that employers who have gone from fully insured to self-funded, you think, oh, you skipped the captive step. No, there's still value in the captive for employers who are currently self-funded, but it's just important to understand how it works.
It is totally, and we've reaped the benefits of being the captive. Our stop loss renewals have been relatively stable. I mean, we're looking at like slightly over 10%, which in a leverage trend environment, that's actually pretty good. We're not moving deductible up, and we've gotten dividends. So the other thing about captives, and it depends on the captive. And don't get me wrong, you can go to a stop loss carrier and get a refunding contract, right? So this isn't exclusive to captives, but many captives have provisions to where if the quote captive layer, the amount the captives all share in terms of the risk, if that performs better than expected, then they will distribute a certain portion of that back to the firms. So it's kind of like a mutual dividend, a mutual insurance company dividend, if you will. So that potential upside is also one of the benefits of being a captive or an exclusive.
It's going to take a minute for that to catch on. So let's move on to issue 2 because that is a perfect segue. Let's talk about financial value. So really getting to the heart of, are captives truly more cost effective long term than being on your own and as a self-funded employer? So captives, here's the promise. That there's a financial upside, shared underwriting profits, collective buying power, potential dividends over time, just as you described. And on paper, that sounds like employers can keep money that would otherwise go to insurers. And I think a lot of employers love the sound of that. But skeptics point out that captives require upfront capital and the savings aren't immediate, and there's an extra layer of administrative costs. So some employers might never see a financial payoff, and a direct self-funded plan might avoid those complexities. So my question related to the financial value is the long-term financial benefit real, or are companies just paying for complexity? Zach?
I definitely think it can be real. I don't think there's any doubt. I mean, especially when you think about, again, the stop loss trend. You mentioned deductible leveraging. I mean, stop loss trend is always going to be about double typical medical trends. So if you can insulate yourself from that to some degree and then have some reliability around those renewals, you can absolutely see long-term financial gain. I mean, I do think we are seeing the captive stop loss market trend ticking up. But it's still well below traditional stop loss trend. So I think for sure it can do that. I think, again, you do limit yourself. You limit yourself from a full market of carriers to look at. When you are having a good year or you don't have a lot of known large claimants, you might have one outside of the captive. You limit yourself on potentially your provider, your network of doctors. So, you're kind of subject to whatever's going on with provider contracting or issues in those areas. So there's some limitations that could, not necessarily from a financial perspective, that could impact employees or human resources. But I do think Fundamentally, I do think you could see long-term financial gains in a captive for sure.
Can I pile onto that a little bit? I agree with everything Zach's saying. You know, it's not all rainbows and cupcakes, right? With a captive necessarily. Everything works until it doesn't, right? And you know, and you've studied stock market and capital markets. There's always an arbitrage, and then it breaks down. So captives are working right now, and the reason captives are working is because they're growing. As soon as a captive stops growing, I think all of the benefits are going to diminish. So captives right now, especially the aggressive ones, are really after getting larger. And at some point, that benefit is going to cease to outpace the traditional market. The other interesting thing about a captive is there is the potential for a capital call. Okay, if the underwriting doesn't go quite as good as expected in the captive layer, then it's possible that they can come back and actually, instead of return a dividend to all the employers, ask them to pay more. Every single group who enters a captive pays collateral. They pay to get into it, into the exclusive. And that collateral sort of protects against that. And what we hear all the time is, well, it's not like the Hotel California where you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. You can actually leave a captive, so you're not really captive. But that collateral is supposed to be returned to you. But likewise, there is, if something goes wrong in the captive, they might come and ask for more money.
Well, and those are all the nuances, right? Of important to have an advisor and a team that knows the nuances of different captives, because there's a lot of different ones in the space now. And they all have slightly different structures, compliance, governing bodies, et cetera. And so I think that's where we bring value to the table in talking about what are those nuances. How do you fund that capital? Is it per employee per month? Is it upfront? Is it percent of stop loss? What does that look like? I think going back to Zach's point though for a minute, captives never spreadsheet well. And our industry is so spreadsheet heavy. Everything has to be on a spreadsheet. We have to see it side by side by side. And that's not inherently a bad thing, but that's where I think a lot of people go a little sideways when they think about, hey, maybe this isn't for next year going to be a lower cost option for me. So why would we do this, right? I have my stop loss contract over here in the open market that is X. I have the captive proposal here that is Y. This is more expensive. Why would we do this? And that goes back to my comments earlier about being a philosophical decision and being a long-term decision. Year to year, who knows if you're going to win? Nobody can predict, us included, whether you have a large claim or not. So my response and advocacy for a captive for any group that I think is a good fit for that is, let's protect against that worst case scenario. Because in the open market, I think we've all experienced situations where you might have a renewal that no one could plan for and a stop loss renewal of 100%. I worked through one of those years ago. And so there's just an added downside protection versus trying to position as, hey, you might earn some money out of being in this, which is a nice little gravy kind of on top of everything else.
Yeah, I think we've all experienced within the last 5 years a scenario where we thought this is a once in a career scenario. It was the thing that 10 years ago we only imagined what could happen, right? And it's real now. And so it is interesting to see more and more employers being open to this idea of pooling. But I love your point about spreadsheeting. We do love a good Excel spreadsheet. So picturing the spreadsheet, how would an employer compare different captives? Like,
I actually have, I helped a client with that exact scenario, and it doesn't work well on a spreadsheet. So, yes, it was bumping up two captives, and comparing the stop loss and the fees and the access to the different products inside each of those captives managers, and it's honestly, I think as a consultant, you have to break away from the spreadsheet. This is like an hour-long conversation where you're really getting and thoughtfully talking about the pros and the cons of each. And I would say that captives they are complex. I actually find self-funding on one's own to be an easier conversation than a captive, but I think they're really important to consider. And if you're, with the right consultant who can really walk you through it and help you in simple language, understand the benefits, it's worthwhile.
Well, and I also want to just one last thing to Case's comment around kind of the mentality of different captive managers too. Like, no one is doing it wrong, I don't think. There's a lot of good options. It just depends on the philosophy of those. But there is a mindset that bigger is better, right? That you just get bigger and bigger and bigger to help spread premium risk across the board. And on the flip side, it's, well, you're just attracting more and more and more risk, and you just look like any other large Blue Cross, United, Cigna insurer. On the flip side of that is a mentality around better is better, right? And the exclusive nature, which, has its downsides. Not every one of our clients is going to get an attractive proposal if their claims performance is not where the captive is looking to be at, because you don't want to dilute the pool that's in there.
That's an interesting consideration too, right? About when do you go into a captive? Well, when you're experiencing a large multi-million-dollar ongoing claim, it's not probably the best time for you to get invited to the exclusive party.
No, it's not.
No.
You do it the year after.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Well, and I know we
Yes.
need to move on, but it's
Yeah.
it's very similar to talking to groups about moving to self-funding or not. It's easy to say, oh, we should go self-funded when we had a great year, and then you go get a 0% increase. And I always say, yes, for the long haul, but you actually should do this when you have a bad year. And that's the hardest time for them to get their head around that switch, because they're like, well, what if this happens again? And it's scary, right? So it's tricky.
Well, let's talk about employer control. So we'll move on to issue 3. And that issue is all about, do captives give employers more influence or just more work? Case.
Both.
True.
Both. I mean,
What about, so supporters say that employers can still have their own plan design. They can have just as much control over their plan design as they would if they were self-funded on their own. Governance, long-term strategy, and they're no longer at the mercy of carrier decisions if they're moving from fully insured. On the other hand, captives require active participation. Sometimes they limit the vendor selections that you can make. And so there are some controls depending on the captive that you need to be aware of. So with that Case, path to empowerment for employers or bureaucratic headache?
all right.
It's where you came from a little bit, right?
You're
I mean,
going
that's the other
to make
part
me
of it.
pick one.
Maybe
Can be
just
both.
lean?
It depends.
So again, this is personal as an individualist. Okay. The metaphor is you're driving down the road, right? The best practice when you're driving down the road is to leave yourself an out. Don't follow so close behind the other car that if something happens, you can't get out. So when I'm driving down the highway, I like to leave myself an out, right? I don't like being crowded.
You're the car in the left lane, and all the cars on the right lane are just flying by.
I'm just saying.
He's driving in the emergency lane.
I like
he's
I
off the
like
side of the road.
options. I like options. So, in the risk in the trade-off between more control and more work, I think that exclusives take a certain amount of sovereignty out of the employer's hands, and you're ceding that to other employers, right, for your decisions. And that's why it's a philosophical decision, as Chad was saying. You can always leave a captive. Don't get me wrong. So or an exclusive. You're not stuck in there forever. But just, I would never. I mean, I would always do what's best for the client, right? And if they're a good fit for a captive, I would recommend it. But at the same time, my personal risk profile is, unless there is an overwhelming, compelling reason to join the captive, I like my options to be wide open.
Well, okay, so but let's take that and extrapolate that. So in a year where you're running well, yeah, you can go to market, you can look at all sorts of different things, and you're going to get competitive bids, and look at all the options we have to choose from. $2.4 million claim hits all of a sudden, oh, look at all these options, decline to quote, decline to quote, decline. No one wants that risk. And now you're, you're going to wish that you were in a structure that you are now having no options. At least you're getting subsidy from the capital contributions that everyone's making. We're all in this together.
Can't you get voted off the island though?
Depends on the captive.
You could, in theory, yes, but I have personal experience of a client in a captive year one, terrible year. Didn't expect that to happen, and they got a great, what I would consider a great stop loss renewal given their terrible year. So the protection of the captive was absolutely, to your point, Chad, extremely tangible in that first year that we didn't expect to have happen, including an aggregate reimbursement.
Sure.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, you don't know. And if you are the right profile for a captive where you don't need the entire world of options and you're and maybe you're a little more risk averse, it can absolutely be a great option.
Yeah.
I did want to also add, sorry, kind of like we talked about with ICRA, is finding the right TPA is important. And to your point, Case, you do have less options in a captive. So that is another consideration. So finding the right partner is key. And there is some, you forego maybe some of all those options in the captive strategy. So there is a trade-off there.
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think we're getting that back into the world of protection and risk and all that, which makes a ton of sense. That's really the play with captives. But I do think it is where you come from. If you're an 80-employee company that's stuck in the fully insured space, you're going to open up so many options that you never had before, and it's going to be great. If you're 300, 400, 500 lives, you might lose. You might go backwards a little bit on flexibility. And I think it's interesting. We talked about sort of the DNA of a good fit for the captive. And I know Jane and I both have clients that would almost swing the other way. They're really independent minded. It's not that they don't want to be part of a community, but they want to absolutely drive their own plan and have maximum flexibility. And that's not an unengaged employer. It's almost a souped up engaged employer that wants to be totally on their own, right? And have full flexibility. And so, yeah, you got to understand your client. You got to understand what they're like and who the people are. And I think that's always the other thing. I was thinking about this earlier. We kind of think about this from the perspective of who's in the HR or finance seat when that decision gets made, but we all know that's going to change. And so then you have to be ready to re-explain, resell, re-educate people, because that new person might have a totally different mentality about it. So I think that's another sort of piece.
It's such an interesting conversation to have, understanding, again, not an individual's risk tolerance, but the corporate philosophy around risk tolerance, to your point, to make sure that the decision about choosing to go it alone or self-insure through a captive reflects the company's risk tolerance and not an individual.
That's right.
So that's a really good point. Okay, you mentioned you have a couple souped up employers who want to have control over their own plan, right? And so I would say they probably have a very clear list of core priorities for their health plan, goals, what they want to achieve, what they want to deliver for their employees and their families. So my question is, as a captive, Jane, you said you walk away from captive meetings feeling inspired with new ideas. Like, does a captive help make a plan stronger, open up thinking even beyond what you would do on your own? Or, Zach, to your point, does the extra layer of administration and governance just distract you from your core priorities and keep you busy with other things that actually aren't on your list because they're on the list of everybody else in the captive?
I'll go.
Okay.
I think you can boil it kind of however you want, and you can lean as much in or out to an extent. So you did mention that there are requirements, right? If you're entering into a captive, you are expected to be present, be an active member of this. You will typically have a voting share of big decisions that are made. There's an expectation that you have representation at annual member meetings and what have you. But at the end of the day, a captive at its most basic level is just aggregating stop loss, right, amongst various employers that don't necessarily look the same, but all share a similar mindset. So I think you can go into a captive and still make it whatever you want to make it. And you can still deliver point solutions and different pharmacy contracts, and what you can switch your network. So there's still a lot of flexibility that you as an individual employer can have in a captive framework. Or if you say, we don't want to deal with all that, we want a little bit more of a turnkey solution, that's the value in captives who have done the pre-vetting of great best-in-class point solutions. They are bringing the thoughts of TPG and all of our C2 firms and other firms that have clients in there, and the best ideas from all of those different aspects, and bringing it to the table and saying, hey, we've cultivated a bit of a playbook here that you can tap into that maybe you didn't even know was available before. So I think you can dial that up or down without losing perceived flexibility being on your own.
Well, it doesn't. Oh, go ahead,
just
Zach.
I think it's just really important, and piggybacking off that, and it was mentioned before, not all captives are the same. Right. I mean, and I think that's a really important distinction to make. I mean, some are just pooled stop loss plays, and that's it. Like, go do whatever you want underneath that. And then some bring all these, like the C2 captive, but we're trying to manage it in a different way. We're trying to put in the best in class tools and resources to make it more than just a stop loss play. And I think that is both attractive to some, but also potentially it adds cost layers, it adds complexity, it adds I have to do this or whatever. So that's great for some and not so much for others. So I think it is really important to understand that, captives, they might be apples and oranges and bananas, but they're all fruit, but they're not all apples. So.
Well, and that's, at the end of the day, we were just talking about this week. I mean, a lot of employers right now are dealing with terrible renewals. Yeah. If they are January 1st, this is some of the worst renewals we've ever seen in our business. And so I just think it's a disservice to an employer if they all of a sudden just have a smattering of different options: captives, ICRAs, fully insured carriers, self-funded. I mean, it's just, how do you possibly select? And that goes back, Jane, to your comment of, it's critical that you have conversations well in advance of renewal. What's going on with our population? What are our goals? What are we trying to achieve? And how do we put ourselves into a structure to help best satisfy that, not make a snap decision here less than 90 days out from January 1st.
How far in advance do you think those conversations need to start?
Well, years. I mean, if everyone's doing our job at this table, you should be having multi-year discussions with employer groups around, hey, this is what this renewal looks like, but where are we going to go from here? And maybe that's not physically on a piece of paper, but it's talked about frequently in pre-renewal discussions, renewal discussions, check-ins, claim utilization. We always have that pulse of what are the goals of each individual client and how do we then tailor a plan to them. So for a captive in particular on the complexity, I think, Q1, Q2 of a year, if you're a January 1st or at least 9 to 12 months in advance, let's be talking about this. Let's understand the concept. Let's understand the structure, understand the market. Let's look at preliminary financials. Let's look at firm financials. And you really have that roadmap to step into it and understand it fully.
I agree. This is not a conversation you want to have in September. No. It's and I would say this
having
is
some of those though.
It's for some inevitability, but
exactly.
In an ideal world.
Yes.
In an ideal world. But you can kind of also get a sense for which clients, might be the right fit for the captive. So you can start those conversations very early on. And I find personally that is the best way to do it because it is, it's complicated. It's not something, you might need several conversations to really get the concept to sink in and feel comfortable with considering it for, a January 1 renewal. And so giving yourself enough runway to have those conversations, to really look at all the different options and ask the right questions. We've got a great partner in ICS who will come have those conversations alongside us. So it's definitely not something you want a spreadsheet or.
Well, and we forget that we do this every day, right? So we live in benefits. Most executive teams do not. I mean, this is something they get reminded about a few times a year. And so it's important that you continue to have that dialogue and make sure that everyone's brought along on the path together.
Well, those are all the conversations you guys are having right now. I know you're helping all of your January first groups through a really tough renewal season. And I do think it's interesting that I think we're having more captive conversations this year than we have ever had in the past with employers. But Jane, to your point, we could be talking to them about it for the first time this renewal cycle, knowing fully well it's probably a 1/1/27 strategy, right? Because it does take a long time to understand how it works, right? And at least feel like they understand the alternatives. So.
And I would say, I think one of the hardest things to kind of wrap your head around is that you can't run away from your claims. Like your claim, you'll pay your claims one way or another. It's just that you have a chance to win.
Unless you go extra.
Actually, you can. You can. There is an off ramp of that highway, right? The ultimate out is exit 123.
We were laughing before we started this conversation. You weren't in the room yet, Case, but we were laughing about you as our chief individualist. And we said, you do know, like, the whole premise of insurance is pooling together. I know you might be in the wrong industry. There may be some cognitive dissonance there for you.
You left him speechless.
Risk management is the name of the game for our employers.
Yes. Yeah. And that's what we do.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, thank you, everybody. This was another enjoyable debate. And I think that it's really helpful for employers who are looking at their costs that are escalating at such a severe increase. They have to know what the alternatives are. And it is good to have RC2 captive as that alternative, and good to be able to wrestle through that not every solution is right for every employer, and every solution has a downside. And so really making sure you understand what that cost is up front so that you can mitigate those and accept them, right, as you move forward and have confidence in your decision going forward. So thank you all. This has been fun. I like this format.
It's a good time.
You guys are great.